Hey guys, I'm Jordan and I'm your Eat More dietitian. Okay, so I want to start a monthly series. So once a month, I want to pick a topic and talk about the cost-benefit assessment of that topic. I get the sense that many of us think we should be on weight loss diets, or at least most of us, and ultimately I don't know that that's the case. Assuming that it is, well, and it doesn't take into account the incredible variety of priorities at any given moment in our lives or between each of us. I want to help individuals get to their goals, not my goals for them, their goals. So this series will take a look at some of the maybe disregarded or just not considered aspects of various healthy habits for your consideration. As always, this is not medical advice. This video is intended to be informational. Only you should consult your physician, dietitian, or other licensed healthcare provider for individualized care for you. Now that that's out of the way, this first one that I wanted to do is kind of a big one, and I don't know that everyone's going to agree with me, and that's okay. I want to talk about counting calories. Now, for each of these main topics, we are going to answer the same series of questions for some consistency, and we're going to add a handful that may be more pertinent to each specific topic. When we start counting calories, what is it that we are trying to achieve? Most of the time, when we start talking about wanting to count calories, what we want is to more concisely control the energy that is going into our body, the energy input. We think that counting calories will mean we are in control. Not all the time, but most of the time, in my experience, we start to control calories and want to control our intake because we want to either lose weight or lose fat, or every once in a while, I'll get somebody who wants to gain weight, who wants to gain muscle. We start counting calories as a way to try and externally control our body's functions, what that metabolism is going to look like. So what do we want? We want to control our intake. Either increase or decrease, we want to control that intake. Now, what are the costs? Let's talk time first. Counting calories takes a lot of time out of our day. To accurately count calories, we need to accurately know how much we're actually getting in, either counting out a certain number of chips or weighing out a certain amount of chicken or measuring out a certain amount of grain. It means taking the time to measure how much food we're actually getting in and then use that nutrition label that's provided or use generic information from the internet to assess about how many calories we're getting. Time is taken just getting the portions figured out. Then there's the time of actually counting the calories. There are a number of apps out there that exist that allow you to scan a label. It does all the math for you. That does decrease the amount of time, but it's still going to take time because you still have to search for that item. You still have to input that item. If you're doing it really thoughtfully, you're going to have to make sure that it's close to right to what you're looking at on your label. There's a lot of time cost that goes into counting calories. After you do it really astutely for a long period of time, you start to get the idea, right? You start to be able to estimate these things. But not just like 1 or 2 times, like 10 or 12 or 15 times you need to be measuring these things. Time aspect is pretty costly. The money aspect. Money is going to be a fun one for counting calories because the counting calories part doesn't necessarily have to cost money, but there's a chance that if you start paying attention to calories and even more so to macros, it's going to cost more money because you're going to try and opt for things that are more nutritionally dense, I think is the word I want to use here. We're opting for the whole foods, we're opting for the leaner options on our meats, we're opting for fruits and veggies that have to be eaten fairly quickly, we're opting for snacks that are going to be like higher protein snacks or higher fiber snacks. Those things tend to come with higher cost. So is a money cost just to the types of foods that we're buying now that we're counting calories and we're being more aware of what we're taking in. There's also the cost potential for the app that we're using. The more convenient features, a lot of times they're behind a paywall. MyFitnessPal, for example, has a free version, but a lot of the nice, quick, time-saving options are behind the paywall. There are a couple others. There's a potential for money to use the tools to actually keep track for you. Let's talk about cost to the social. If we're counting our calories and we're being mindful of how much we're taking in, it's going to come with a little bit of a social burden. It's probably going to affect how often we go out to eat. It's probably going to affect whether or not we buy or we eat certain things. There's going to be a social cost. Sitting at the table with your friend, scrolling through your app, trying to figure out, okay, what can I eat that still hits my goals? That's a distraction from when you're spending time with people that you may or may not want. Other costs specifically associated with calorie counting are mental fatigue from trying to do the best thing all the time. Again, this is something that will lessen over time because the more experience you have, the more practice you do, the better you'll be at it. But it's a pretty heavy mental burden starting out. And I think it's a big reason why people don't do it consistently enough to really see the results that they're looking for. Other cost is frustration. If we don't set a good calorie goal to start with, we're going to be really hungry. We're going to be really irritable. And those are costs as well. Finally, the last big cost that I want to mention associated with calorie counting is the lack of accuracy. I've posted about this before. Calories on a nutrition label don't have to be exact. They can have a margin of error of up to 20%, which can be pretty significant. And if that's what we're basing our intake on, if that's the number that we're going to use to assess, okay, I had 3 ounces of this type of chicken thigh, and it says that it should be this many calories per ounce, and we do that math, if that last number is off, our whole estimate is off. We could be 20% under where we think we are. Under is less likely. There are reasons for that. We're not going to get them today. It's most likely going to be 20% over. If you are 20% over what you think you're trying to hit, even if it's a good target, it's going to be really hard to lose weight. We want to lose weight on the most amount of food. We're probably only going to drop our calories 5% to 10% off of where we think. So we don't get as many of those negative effects of not eating much. 20% could erase that margin that we're trying to lose weight on. So those are some of the costs of calorie counting. Let's talk about the benefits. What are benefits? Time-wise, I got nothing. Money-wise, we're going to be spending more intentionally. It also means that if we are being aware of how much we're taking in, that we could end up spending a little bit less, specifically less on things that don't necessarily contribute to those goals. So we could save a little bit of money on just not buying some of those onesie-twosie treats and things that we don't want to eat because we're trying to stick to a set calorie limit. Benefits socially, there is some social capital that comes with losing weight. There's some social capital that can come with having a group of people who you are all doing some sort of calorie counting or weight loss or body fitness challenge together. There could be a social benefit there. It is also a topic of conversation, but I don't find it to be a very beneficial or productive one. Last, mental benefits of counting calories. Again, I don't think there are a lot of mental benefits. I think it's exhausting mentally, but you know what? There could be a benefit to being more aware of how and what you're taking in. You can be more mindful of sugar intake and you can be more mindful of inadequate protein intake. If you're looking at calories, a lot of times those macros could be counted up as well. And so bringing some awareness to those things could have a positive mental benefit. If we're not having sugar spikes up and down all day, every day, our mood will improve. There could be a mental aspect as well to the benefits. Okay, we talked about some costs, we talked about some benefits. I think it's important to ask ourselves, where do we start to hit resistance? A couple that I think of off the top of my head are going to be social outings. Counting calories when we go out is really difficult. A lot of restaurants have nutrition information available, but if you try to eat locally, they are not required to give you nutrition information. So it can be really hard to estimate because you don't know what they're cooking with, you don't know what other things they're adding in. It's really hard. That's going to be a friction point. Another friction point is, again, that mental load of just having to keep track of every single thing. With a 20% margin of error on the label, you don't have a lot of room for error on your part. You have to be very exact. And the last friction point is going to be the time required. Many of us don't like spending the time to cook and clean, much less to actually measure out on top of that and measure out exactly what we're having and make sure we include any bites we took while we were taste testing. It's a lot of effort to do it well. So those are 3 big friction points I see right off the bat. Now, for each one, you need to ask yourself, is this surmountable? What will it take? Is it worth the effort? For the last one, for measuring things. Is it surmountable? Sure. Ultimately, we're talking about an extra couple of minutes, but we're talking about an extra couple of minutes at each meal. It's doable. What will it take? It will take a food scale. It will take some measuring cups. It will take patience and commitment to actually do it. Is it worth the effort? I can't answer that for you. For some people, it will be worth the effort and it will be worth the payoff. For other people, it's probably not, and it's not the biggest thing that they need to address. So they may put it on the back burner while they're addressing some other things. But ultimately, you have to decide if it's worth the effort for you. Now, this last one's a big one, and I like to ask my clients this every time we set any sort of goal. Is this something I see myself doing long term? Your 30-day challenge or your 75-day challenge or your 90-day challenge may be good for those 90 days, and you may see some really good progress. But if this isn't something you see yourself doing long term, and I'm talking 1 year, 5-year, 10-year, it may not be where you need to put your time and effort. Calorie counting is time consuming, mentally consuming, resource consuming. It can be frustrating and tedious. If you don't see yourself doing it long term, I don't know that it's the best thing to start with or to even spend a lot of time and energy on. It's not something you see yourself doing long term. I advise consideration and having a plan for what do I do when that time frame is over. If I am doing this for 90 days, what am I going to do when that 90 days is up? What of these things am I going to keep doing for a year or 5 years or 10 years? There's a reason we see a return of weight after these challenges or a return to previous eating habits after these challenges. Because if it was only for a set period of time, we don't mentally adjust to I'm doing this long term for my health. We just say I'm doing this for 90 days to lose the most weight out of my gym's challenge or to have a awesome summer body for the next couple of months. But if we're not going to do it long term, we're not going to see the true benefits overall. Ask yourself, is this something I see myself doing long term? If not, cool. Let's see if we can pivot a little bit. If it is, awesome. More power to you. I hope that you can maintain that. I just think it's important to take the time to assess these things and decide, okay, here's what I want. Here are the costs. Here are the benefits. Here's where my friction happens. For each of these friction points, here's what it's going to take to overcome it. Is it worth the effort? Is this something I see myself doing long term? So these are questions I'm going to ask in each of these videos. As far as calorie counting goes, I can't decide for you if it's worth the effort or not. I think that it comes down to person, but I do think there are a lot of places where people can improve their lifestyle habits and their dietary habits before we get to calorie counting. I do think that for some people it's the best option, but I do think that for most of us there are other areas that we can really prioritize instead of calorie counting that aren't quite as costly to our time, our money, our social lives, and our mental well-being. Like I said, I'll be doing these. I have one planned for working out. If you have other suggestions, I would love to hear them. I do get the sense that we hear general health advice and we think, oh, I should be doing that without ever actually doing the cost-benefit analysis of that for us personally. I hope you'll follow along. Please subscribe or comment those ideas that you have. I'd love to see them, and I'll see you guys next time.